my car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes...
For nearly 5 decades, Carol Burnett has maintained one of Hollywood's most unusual boundaries. Ask her about countless moments from her legendary variety show, the slapstick routines with Harvey Korman, the spontaneous laughter that broke scenes into pieces, the iconic character work that defined an era, and she'll discuss them with warmth and humor. But mention one specific episode from 1977, and something shifts. Her expression becomes distant. The stories stop. She politely declines, often with just a few words, "I can't watch that one." This isn't false modesty or theatrical hesitation. It's genuine pain, raw and unresolved after nearly 50 years. The episode in question aired as part of the Carol Burnett Show's legendary run, which dominated American television from 1967 to 1978. What made this particular segment different from the thousands of comedic moments the show produced was deceptively simple. It wasn't meant to be funny. In an era when variety television existed primarily to escape life's harsh realities, Carol Burnett and her production team made a choice that defied their entire format. They decided to tell a story that hurt instead of healed, that reminded people of their pain instead of making them forget it. The consequence would be an episode so emotionally devastating that it would haunt the star for the rest of her life. The segment centered around Eunice Higgins, a character Carol had been developing throughout the show's run. Eunice wasn't glamorous or witty. She was a middle-aged woman crushed beneath the weight of disappointment, carrying dreams that had calcified into resentment. In previous appearances, Eunice existed in a space between comedy and tragedy, funny enough to entertain, but human enough to recognize. She was the kind of character that made audiences laugh, while simultaneously making them slightly uncomfortable, aware that they were watching someone's genuine suffering being performed for entertainment. But in this 1977 episode, Carol and the writing team stripped away the protective layers of humor that usually surrounded Eunice's story. The premise was deceptively straightforward. Eunice enters a talent show competition, genuinely believing that this moment, this single, fragile opportunity, might finally launch her to the stardom she'd always deserved. She'd spent decades preparing, developing her voice, dreaming in the darkness of theater seats and dimly lit rooms. This was her chance. The judges, represented by real television personalities of the era, sat behind their table with expressions of casual dismissal. As Eunice performed, her voice wavering with hope, the judges didn't laugh. They mocked. They dismissed. They treated her not with the kindness of an audience indulging a dreamer, but with the cold cruelty that the entertainment industry reserves for those who don't quite measure up. What separated this moment from typical television comedy was the absence of a safety net. There were no exaggerated pratfalls to undercut the emotional weight. No silly costumes or absurd accents to provide distance between the character and the audience. Carol Burnett played the scene with an almost documentary realism, letting her face register each rejection as it landed. The light in Eunice's eyes didn't flicker dramatically. It dimmed gradually, like a candle surrendering to wind. By the end of the performance, when the judges delivered their final verdicts, casual, cutting, dismissive, something shifted in the room. The studio audience, usually primed for laughter and applause, fell into an uncomfortable silence. The camera pulled back slowly on Carol's face as tears streamed down Eunice's cheeks. Not theatrical tears, but real ones, the kind that come from a place deeper than performance. There was no laugh track to signal that everything was okay, no comedic resolution to tie things up neatly. Just a woman facing the truth that some dreams die quietly, that talent isn't always rewarded, that the world doesn't owe anyone their moment of glory. The credits rolled over this image of quiet devastation, and the studio audience didn't quite know how to respond. Some applauded, but it felt more like respect for a brave performance than appreciation for entertainment. The episode aired once, as most episodes did in that era. It wasn't promoted as special. There was no indication in the television listings that viewers were about to witness something that would generate critical discussion for decades. But when critics reviewed that week's episode, something unexpected happened. They didn't praise the comedy. They praised the courage. Major publications called it groundbreaking television, a moment when a performer had taken off her mask and shown the machinery underneath. Burnett received accolades she'd never sought for this particular piece of work, recognition that was meant as honor but felt to her like exposure. Understanding why Carol Burnett has never been able to revisit this episode requires understanding something fundamental about who she is as a person. Her childhood was marked by poverty so profound that it didn't just shape her circumstances. It shaped her identity. Her parents were both alcoholics, lost to their addictions in ways that made Carol the parent rather than the child. She grew up in a cramped boarding house in Hollywood, surrounded by other broken dreams and broken people. She learned early that survival meant becoming useful, becoming entertaining, becoming someone who could make others smile even when the world was collapsing. Comedy became her armor, laughter her escape route. When Carol created Eunice Higgins for her show, she was drawing from real observation. She'd seen women like Eunice her entire life, talented, genuine, deserving, but somehow invisible to the machinery of show business. Some were her mother's friends, women who'd come to Hollywood with dreams and stayed to nurse disappointments. Some were people she'd encountered in her own early years of struggle, before her brilliance became undeniable, before the doors opened. But more than that, Eunice was also a part of Carol herself. The part that wasn't sure she deserved success, that feared she might be discovered as a fraud, that worried the world's cruelty might eventually prove more powerful than her resilience. In the early years of the show, Eunice's storylines included comedic elements that created psychological distance. The dysfunction of Eunice's family, the absurdity of her situations, the character's own flaws, all of these provided ways for audiences to laugh rather than hurt. But in 1977, Carol was at a different place in her life. She'd already achieved extraordinary success. She'd proven herself time and again. She'd built an empire of entertainment that had changed television itself. Yet at the same time, her personal life was complicated in ways the public didn't fully understand. Her marriages were troubled. Her children were struggling. The protective shell she'd built around herself was developing cracks. That particular episode required Carol to do something she'd spent decades learning not to do. She had to be honest. Not the rehearsed honesty of a character study, but the raw honesty of someone who understands that rejection is real, that disappointment is permanent, and that talent alone doesn't guarantee anything. When she played Eunice facing those judges, she wasn't playing a character anymore. She was remembering every audition she'd ever attended where the response was lukewarm. She was channeling every moment she'd felt invisible despite being visible. She was accessing the part of herself that still feared, despite all evidence to the contrary, that she might not be enough. The episode also came at a time when television itself was changing. The late 1970s marked a transition from the escapist entertainment that had defined the previous decade toward more socially conscious programming. Yet the Carol Burnett Show had always been designed as a refuge, a place where audiences went to forget their troubles and laugh. The 1977 episode violated that fundamental contract between performer and audience. Carol gave people permission to feel bad, and that was both its greatest strength and the reason it would haunt her. In interviews over the following years, Carol has been remarkably consistent about her reasoning. She said that the sketch was too real, that playing Eunice's heartbreak so directly required accessing something in herself that was too painful to revisit. She's explained that she made the episode to prove that comedy and drama weren't mutually exclusive, that television could do both. But success in that goal came at a personal cost. Having gone to that emotional place once, having delivered that performance with such authenticity that critics recognized the realness of it, she found she couldn't go back. To watch the episode again would be to relive not just the character's pain, but her own. This choice reveals something important about Carol Burnett as an artist and as a human being. She's never been someone who performs emotion without feeling it. Her comedy worked because there was always truth underneath the silliness. Her ability to break character mid-sketch and dissolve into genuine laughter came from a place of authentic delight. She couldn't fake it, even when the role might have called for it. That authenticity is part of why she became a legend. But it also means that the vulnerable places she's explored in her performances remain genuinely vulnerable. They don't become safe just because time has passed. The 1977 episode evolved far beyond its original broadcast. It inspired a television movie called Eunice in 1982, which explored the character's backstory more fully. That led to the sitcom Mama's Family, which eventually became one of Carol's career regrets when the show's direction moved away from what she'd envisioned. The character of Eunice Higgins became iconic, representing something in American culture that resonated across generations. The quiet tragedy of ordinary people whose dreams don't match their reality. Yet Carol herself has stayed apart from all of it. She hasn't watched the original episode again. She rarely discusses it in interviews, and when she does, it's with a kind of careful distance that suggests the wound, while not exactly fresh, has never quite healed. In 2010, in a rare moment of openness about the episode, she acknowledged that Eunice's pain felt like her own because, in many ways, it was. The poverty, the struggle, the fear that the world might never quite recognize what she had to offer. Those were experiences Carol had lived through. Playing them as pure fiction was one thing. Watching herself access them was another. What makes this particularly poignant is that Carol Burnett has continued working well into her 90s, taking on new roles and challenging herself with different types of characters. She appeared in the final season of Better Call Saul in 2024, receiving Emmy nominations for her guest appearances in shows like Mad About You and Palm Royale. She's proven that she can grow as an actress, that she can access different emotional registers than the broad physical comedy she's most famous for. Yet the one performance she won't revisit is the one that demonstrated all of that decades earlier. The 1977 episode remains available to anyone who wants to watch it. It exists in television archives and streaming services, a historical artifact of a moment when television tried to do something it rarely does: be genuinely sad. But Carol Burnett has chosen not to watch it, and that choice has become part of her legacy as much as the performance itself. It speaks to an artist who understands that some bridges, once crossed, shouldn't be crossed again. Some wounds, once opened, don't need to be reopened. Some performances, however brilliant or important, belong to a moment in time and should be left there, intact and untouched, protected by the mercy of memory rather than the scrutiny of replay. In refusing to watch this one episode, Carol Burnett has made a profound statement about authenticity, vulnerability, and the price of art. She said, without needing to say it directly, that not everything created needs to be consumed, that protection of self is sometimes more important than appreciation of craft, and that an artist's journey includes learning which doors to walk through and which ones to keep closed. The episode remains a testament to her courage and her pain while she moves forward, carrying its weight but choosing not to carry its image. Like, subscribe, and follow for more.